This bombs out.
It's this close to asking Paul.
Right.
As you can see, I'm shower.
Yeah, I shut
Sorry.
that off. Okay. You all set? Not quite. Okay. And my live stream because it's bombing again. Let me check. Move your mouse. There's a delay. Come on. Yep, we're good. Okay. We're all set?
Good to go, Mr. Chairman.
Ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Good evening. I'd like to call the March 13th, 2024 meeting of the TPC to order. Please stand for pledge of allegiance.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Maureen, could you do the roll call, please? Is she on?
Noreen is on.
Okay. I don't,
Can you hear us, Noreen?
Sure she is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, Commissioner Clappy,
here.
Commissioner Fox, Commissioner Minor,
Here.
Commissioner Nafis, Commissioner Pascarelli. Here. Chairman Sobieski,
Here.
Commissioner Woods,
Here.
Commissioner Droz,
Here.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Here.
Commissioner Wakama. You're all set.
Okay, I'd like to appoint Commissioner Droz for Commissioner Fox, please, and Commissioner Hoffman for Commissioner Nafis. Objections? Okay.
Hey,
Next
Mr.
is the,
Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
yes,
before you start, there is no video of the council chambers, so we can't see you. We can hear you, but there's no video being shown.
So the
I don't know if Paul or Eric can do anything.
Yep, so they did change things earlier today and fix
looking
things.
into it.
And I will see what I can do.
How's that better?
Yep, you got it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is approval of the agenda. Chris,
Make a motion to approve the agenda as published.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next, we're gonna have public participation for items not listed on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Anybody wishing to speak?
No one online has their hand raised, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We'll move on then to zoning officers report. Eric?
You have the report. Are there any questions? Anything in particular?
No.
Any questions on there? No.
No.
Okay. Next is remarks by commissioners. Remarks by commissioners? No. Okay, we have no public hearing tonight, so the next thing will be approval of the minutes. I hear a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion approved.
Commissioner Droz, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Hoffman, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, very good. New business. Petition 2-24 site plan approval for construction of a 3,000 square foot contractor's garage and office in the industrial zone, I zone 161 Carr Avenue. Applicant, contact James Campbell.
All right, so the applicant is here tonight. I would like him to, if possible, just make his presentation and then I can follow with
Okay.
the planner's report.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, staff. For the record, my name is Alan Bon Giovanni. I'm a licensed land surveyor in the state of Connecticut with an office at 170 Payne Road, Newington. I'm representing Jamie Campbell in the application before you tonight. The property is known as 161 Carr Avenue. It's about a 9,000 square foot lot that is in the I industrial zone. On the east side is Carr Avenue. To the west is the railroad tracks, and then further west is city of New Britain. To the north is a small, about 2,500 square foot building that is owned by Mr. Campbell, that is used as an office for his plumbing and heating and mechanical business. And to the south is a small industrial building that's used as a wood shop. The proposal here is to create the site plan that we can accommodate a 3,000 square foot building. And this is for Mr. Campbell's business, Campbell Heating and Cooling, basically to store his service trucks inside the building. There is small office space in there to accommodate the different crew members that he has working for them. But for the most part, it's to overnight store the vehicles and over the weekend store the vehicles so they're not in the weather and they're protected. He has another location on Stam Road, fairly close to this location. And over the years, he and most of the other businesses on Stam Road have been the subject of vandalism and theft. And he has for a couple of years now been trying to get to this point where he could build a building as an annex to his business to allow him to store his trucks inside. His use is a mechanical contractor, heating, plumbing, heating, air conditioning. He is not a typical site contractor where he needs outside storage. The building he's proposing has a residential style to it at a scale similar to what you have in the neighborhood. There's no outside storage, there's no outside maintenance or work on vehicles. We're proposing to put 2 parking spaces to accommodate the employee that comes in and takes a truck out and then brings it back at the end of the day and he leaves. This is the type of neighbor that, as we have residential across the street, will make a good neighbor because it's not a business that's open 24 hours a day. It will have no signage on the building, identifying it as a commercial establishment. And on weekends and things like that, it's going to be a building that sits there and collects taxes for the town of Newington with no offensive nature to the neighborhood. We've designed the site. Eric has a plan up on the screen. Again, with the driveway in the front, accessing 2 overhead garage doors so that the vehicles can get in and out of the building, and then 2 parking spaces. It will be serviced by public utilities, MDC sewer and water. We have a storm drainage system designed for the site where we capture the drainage in the front of the parking lot in a catch basin, then route it around the south side of the building into an underground stormwater system that will also renovate the stormwater for water quality, and then exit it into an existing town drainage system that runs east to west and exits near the railroad tracks. It's a fairly simple site plan. There are building elevations. If you could just take a quick look at that.
Give me a minute on that.
Well, while we're doing that,
Yeah.
Paul's going to get into his report. There are a couple of issues here where the site may or may not be in compliance with the regulations. One is sidewalks. We're not proposing sidewalks. It is a requirement of the site plan requirements. But there are no sidewalks on either side of the street for the entire length of the street. And I can say with almost certainty that in the future, sidewalks would never be put on that street for any reason. So we think it would be wise not to require Mr. Campbell to install those sidewalks. The other issue is 6.10.5, that's buffers. Your regulations state that when you have an industrial use adjacent to a residential zone, that the commission may require buffering. It says, I quote, "If in the judgment of the commission, a buffer area is necessary to protect residential areas within or adjacent to the proposed area, the commission may require landscaping, fencing, or other appropriate screening within a required front, side, or rear yard in an amount and a location appropriate to the need for such screening." As this is such a small site, as this is going to be a very innocuous use, we don't feel buffering is going to be required. If you look at the other industrial properties to the north and to the south, there has never been any buffering required by this commission when those properties were developed. And we believe it would be a severe inconvenience for this property. Again, it's a 9,000 square foot lot. We're proposing to put a 3,000 square foot building on, so there's not a lot of flexibility. We did look at minimizing the size of the building, but given the vehicles and he has a trailer that he would park in the building, anything smaller wouldn't satisfy his needs. So again, I don't feel a buffer is required in this area. Again, it's across the street from homes that are probably 10 foot above the road. So they're not looking directly at this structure. It's shown or described in the planner's report as a 2-story building. It's actually a 1-story building with some loft area. So they can store certain supplies like air conditioner filters and things like that. The next issue, so in our opinion, we don't believe a buffer would be necessary, and we hope this commission finds the same. There is some discussion of when a buffer would be required. And it talks about things like outside storage, maintenance of vehicles and equipment and outside. Again, this is going to be a relatively clean site. It's not going to have much different appearance other than maybe a little more pavement than your typical residential area or building in the neighborhood. Definitely much cleaner than the properties that you have on the street at this point. The last issue for this commission to decide is parking. Section 3.16.3 talks about no parking shall be required within 25 feet of residential zone boundary. The zone boundary is Carr Avenue, the west side of Carr Avenue. If we can't have any parking or pavement in that area, kind of renders the lot useless. I think this is a section of the regulations that has been in the books for a long, long time. It probably hasn't been visited in a long time, but I think it contradicts itself in ways. And I don't know that it's a practical application for this site. Having said that, I'd be happy
Your
to answer.
architectural is up, by the way, just seeing.
Oh, thank you.
Do you have the front face of the building? Yeah, like following the page.
There you go. Having said that, be happy to answer any questions you may have. Again, I think this is a fairly simple application. There's a couple issues for the commission to consider. But I think when you look at the plan and look at the intent and the use of the property, I think you'll find that what we propose should be adequate.
Any questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Droz.
What's your plan? Are you planning on a dumpster on the property? What are you planning to do with it? Because if obviously knowing what mechanical cooling does, if trucks are coming back from just having installed the filters that you're storing in the loft, what are you doing with the old ones?
So they have a dumpster located on Stam Road at their main facility, and that's where all that will take place. They'll probably have a residential garbage toter and a recycling bin on the property stored inside the building.
Okay. Only other question. Has the fire commissioner said anything as far as vehicles stored indoors? Are the restrictions or that with them? I've heard it commercially. I've had trouble when I was doing corporate America and tried to bring a car into my building.
So this is no different than many industrial uses that store buildings inside. I'm sure they're gonna have to meet the standard fire codes and fire protection, things like that, but there should be no prohibition for this use.
Okay.
Yes, Chris. Mr. Minor, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just real quick, site lighting,
Site lighting.
off the building, freestanding poles,
No.
shielded, non-shielded?
So we proposed two building mounted site lights over the doors on the front of the building. There'll be full cutoff fixtures, energy efficient LED type fixtures.
Okay, nothing on the sides or the rear?
No, we will have on the north side of the building, there will be an egress door there, so it'll probably have a little
Emergency or
low watt
just
emergency
normal
light.
light?
Yes.
Okay, and the only other consideration is nothing outside in terms of storage at this point?
Absolutely
proposed,
not.
and
Nothing now, nothing planned, and I mean, you can
that
make
would be my only consideration for buffering is if,
yeah, you can make that a condition of approval if the law allows you to.
thank you.
I have a question, a real quick one. Trucks or the vehicles are gonna be stored inside the building. There's
Yes.
gonna be a drain in there,
No,
floor drain at
No.
all?
No.
What about the catch basin outside? Is that gonna have an oil water separator in it?
it won't have an oil separator, and that's not required for water quality or the drainage regulations. But it will have, this drainage system will have, that basin will have a snout on it, so it'll capture any floatables, hydrocarbons, so that they don't go downstream to the detention system. But between those measures there, the deep sump, and then the isolator row in the detention system, you'll receive greater than the 80% total suspended solid removal.
Mr. Planner?
Yep, so, and I'll just kind of note too, that this is not actually for action for you tonight. The, wetland, report is still pending. So they have not acted yet. So, it would be tabled tonight regardless, but the key thing tonight here is kind of that input on buffers. So, what staff is asking the commission for is to kind of make some of those determinations, specifically as noted, by Mr. Bongiovanni, that, sidewalks required. As I said, in the regulations, when it speaks about sidewalks shall be installed along the frontage of public street when determined to be necessary by the commission. So there is a good amount of judgment involved in that regulation. It's not a point blank sidewalks are required. It does institute, the judgment of the commission. So that's one item. Again, that other item is the buffer. When it actually says in 3.163, it does say the no parking, which is the third issue that we're going to have to discuss, but no parking within 25 feet. And then a buffer, meaning the requirements of 6.10 is required whenever the use structure, raw materials, outside storage, maintenance area, etc. So it does include the use adjoins a residential zone. So again, this is a small property. It is the zoning map does pretty much show that the zone line does cross the street. There's other areas where it's potentially in the center, and there's some areas on our zoning map where the street actually lacks any coloring in them, and then it's kind of just separated. So, and I've looked back into the 90s, and it looks very similar in this area on how it's been portrayed. I tried to find anything in our zoning regulations saying when there's a zone, it shall follow the center line. There's nothing in there. There's only specifics that says when there's a question about the map that the commission determines where that zone line actually is. So, so those are the two items that are kind of those discretionary items, because when talking about a buffer, it says buffers required associated with that section. Go back to that section. It says when, deemed appropriate by the commission. So what I would like to do is actually share on the Zoom meeting. It lets me. Why do I not have a share button?
Oh,
Paul, you're pulling that up.
Yep.
Just ask one more question. So the parking counters is proposed is just one parking space and one handicap, correct?
Exactly.
Do you promote me or? I just made you a co-host. Okay. Yeah, oh, there we go. It took a moment.
The applicant, quite honestly, could probably suffer through not having the two parking spaces there. It's just inconvenient. They're gonna pull a car in, take one truck out, move the car over. The next guy comes in, he's gotta do the same thing. It's just not practical.
Paul, is there a requirement 4 parking count on this by its application or no?
Yeah, so there will be a requirement. Industrial is typically, it's always looked at 1 per 1,000 or the amount of employees. So if you consider if there was only 1 employee who would typically be going to this use and picking up a truck, that would be for that, and then for the office space. So it typically would require those 2 to 3 spaces depending. So that's why I had a discussion previously regarding, does the commission consider space in front of the doors as parking spaces? So if those parking spaces weren't there and that's a driveway, it's kind of the same difference on a lot like this. I understand the purpose of the regulation, but the regulation just states no parking shall be located within 25 feet of a residential boundary, and then it goes into the buffer. So it doesn't say, when not found by the commission. It just talks about the buffer. The 25-foot buffer shall be measured along the non-residential side. So it's something a little different that adds on to that other section with the buffer. There's nothing here that really says it can be, when appropriate. So it's kind of that older regulation that was kind of noted. But what I'd like to do is, so I have up on the screen. So in front of you, this is the lot in question that we're looking at. So immediately adjacent to it, this is one of the existing industrial buildings that is there. Has been there for some time. As you can see, condition is a little rough. This again was 2019, but I believe it's pretty similar to the condition today. As you can see, paved out to the road. And then I'm gonna try not to make people sick by slowly moving around. You can see the residential houses on the other side of the street. So this is kind of what you're looking at. As noted, they are set up a little bit from this property. And I'll kind of go down. So it just kind of gives you the lay of the land. And then you can see the applicant's current building. And then again, the lot in question. So this is really what we're talking about. It is a small lot. As far as the 25 foot parking, that's something to discuss. If the commission said, okay, we're okay with the removal of that, we can count the parking spaces in front. That's a way forward in working with the regulations. Another way is to possibly seek a variance. We know that does take time, effort, and it's not always a guarantee as well too. This is a unique lot compared to when you think industrial zones, you're picturing big lots, loading bays, industrial, manufacturing. You aren't picturing these small lots, so it is a little unusual. The Car Ave just as a whole road is a little unusual, having residential and industrial right across from each other, just separated by a road. So what I would ask is that first a determination on sidewalks is discussed. As you can see, what I'll do is I'll kind of note here the lay of the land along Carr Road.
Commissioner Minor?
Yeah, it's just based on the existing site conditions of the abutting properties and all the way down the street, there's no sidewalk. And I think to require the applicant to install a sidewalk on his frontage is just kind of pointless because it's a sidewalk to nowhere that's just going to take up space.
Any other commissioners with questions? No? Yes, Commissioner.
Mr. Minor,
Okay.
Commissioner Minor, it's, that's the equivalent of the sidewalks that are now on the Berlin Turnpike that's just in each corner, but they don't go anywhere. If the state wants to do that, rock on. I don't see that we really need to.
Okay. Okay, we'll call for a vote. All in favor? All right, opposed? Okay.
Yep. So what I would actually recommend,
waive
so that's
side-
good. It seems like
Vote
there's
for what?
consensus. Yeah, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. A vote to not put, to waive the right to put sidewalks in front of the building.
Yep, so
Commissioner Claffey.
May I speak, Commissioner Claffey?
Sure.
Why would we do this not the end of the hole when Paul is done with everything he's asking for us to look at? Because he talked about the buffer too, and that's part of the buffer is the sidewalk, I think, in the regulations, right? So are we voting on these individually or are we voting as a whole, Mr. Planner?
We're gonna do them individually.
Yep. So what I would maybe even recommend too is incorporating them as part of a final motion.
Yes.
I think that may be good too, as we looked at, but I think it's important right now. It seems like there's consensus So that way moving forward, so the applicant, when they develop their plans, that they're not gonna spend the time between now and the next meeting grading,
Right.
working on that. So I think, yeah, it's just kind of gaining that consensus that there's that, a vote will be held.
Once the
With,
wetlands is,
yes.
okay. All right, any questions on the, any questions on the buffer? Commissioner Minor?
The only, and I don't even necessarily, I think the only statement I have to that is if it's at all feasible, I would rather see a little more green space along the public right of way and not so much in terms of parking if it's not necessarily required, just from the neighboring residential properties to look at a lawn versus asphalt on the frontage. And especially if the existing site conditions next door are that of a lawn area, I believe on the property that is currently owned by Campbell, is the front of it is lawn area, correct?
It's about a third of its
Okay.
lawn area. There's actually some pavement there
Right,
where they do park cars and.
but versus asphalt all the way to
Correct.
the right of way. I think that would be my preference. And as far as side buffering, I don't think that's really necessary because you've got industrial on either side or commercial on either side. The residential abutters are across the street. And to buffer that from visibility, I think just by the elevation would
Yes.
basically block the entire visibility of the building. I don't think that's-
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Claffey, you have anything?
No, sir.
Okay, would just like, no, I'd like to have a vote on the buffers. All in favor? Okay, yeah, I need a verbal yes or no. Yes, okay. Any opposed? Okay,
But what is, you didn't speak of what is, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we haven't spoke of what is proposed for the buffer. Was it just, it looks like on that plan, 2 trees in the grass or no trees in grass? I don't know. What is the buffer? I haven't seen a drawing. You talked
So-
about parking. Are we moving I assume parking's gonna stay the same because it's just a tiny little building for their trucks.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, so I
Yes,
think what
please.
we can propose, we showed the 2 shade trees along the front of the property. We do have a grass area that's in front of the
Mhm.
parking. I think we can probably enhance that with some elevation, a little bit of a berm, and then do a nice landscaping job to hide the pavement.
I think that would be
Yep.
that would be ideal.
in the best
Thank you.
interest.
Okay, Commissioner Claffey?
Yes, Chairman, thank you.
Yep. So, Mr.
All
Chairman,
right.
if I may.
Final, yes.
So I'll just kind of reiterate again for the applicant as well too. It does sound like a full 25-foot buffer is not required. Again, it's in the front. It's similar to other uses around it. However, potentially, again, some enhancement when it comes back in front of you for a appropriate level of buffering is what's requested.
This is just to give them guidance as to what
Yes.
to look. That's all we're doing here.
And, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Commissioner Woods has his hand raised
Yes,
as well.
Commissioner Woods.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. So what we're telling the applicant, there is no buffer needed on the north and south side of the building or west side of the building, but to do some sort of an enhanced landscape buffer to the best they can within the tight spaces that they have and the little island in front of the parking spots and then the island that kind of juts out where that net pool is. Correct?
Yes. I believe that's correct, right? Yes.
All right, I'm good with that.
Okay, thank you.
Does they
And
want them to
parking.
stay on
And
their
the
own
last
property?
thing, what's that?
Do they want them to stay on their own property with the buffering? Rather than out in the right of way?
Yeah, well, the right of way would likely, Mr. Hinckley asked a question regarding, staying on the property with the buffering, in the street right of way, you wouldn't want necessarily a lot of plantings. That does cause some issues. So yeah, it would be, enhancing it the best you possibly can within the property, and the right of way most likely would stay grass. But that's something we can have an internal discussion with engineering and public works as well.
And the other one was parking.
So parking is the trickier one. There is, as far as I can tell, and please review this regulation as well too. I do have it noted in the staff report. I kind of took it directly from it. Again, that it just point blankly says no parking shall be located within 25 feet of a residential zone. It then goes into a buffer meeting the requirements, as section 6.10 is required whenever the use, structure, raw materials, outside storage, maintenance area, etc., but not limited to the foregoing, adjoins the residential area. When the zone boundary follows the center line of the street, the 25-foot buffer shall be measured along the non-residential side of the street right of way. So it says two things at once. It says no parking shall be located within 25 feet, and then it says a buffer meeting the requirements. So it is within the planning, and that's actually the zoning commission aspect of it, but within the planning and zoning commission's jurisdiction to interpret their regulations. This is the way, it does seem separate to me, but I have been here for a year with the town. I have not seen this been applied in multiple different scenarios and how it's been interpreted by the TPZ in the past. Again, they do look separate, but that's a discussion that I would like to have with the TPZ.
Any questions? Commissioners? Commissioner Minor?
Yeah, the only, just clarification, I think, Paul, would be if we were to eliminate those parking spaces as they're currently drawn on the blueprint and place them in lieu directly in front of the overhead doors as temporary, does that satisfy? I think we're all outside of the 25 feet. It's more conducive to looking residential. The building itself looks, more residential than commercial. Is that aesthetically more pleasing, and is it necessary?
I think it would be if the commission is, and I've seen cases where, this is a little different than a typical industrial application. For example, when we go to residential, we count in the driveway as parking spaces.
Right.
So there is some grounds for looking at things parked in a driveway as long as it's not obstructing other circulation, as long as the site can work. Because, what the neighborhood wouldn't necessarily be looking for is, okay, you eliminate those spaces. Is that putting additional cars on the road, things like that around it? And it is a pretty narrow street. Now, if that's something that the applicant says, I'm parking in front of the garage, I'm parking in the driveway is going to be required regardless. It's an interesting interpretation of it, but I think that might be a way to potentially look at it as saying, okay, you're giving it a more residential look. Does it still meet the parking requirements? Does the commission count those parking spaces in front of the garage doors? Again, the applicant will have to talk to his client as well to see how that works for the utilization of the site. For us to consider too is, this site isn't just, we know the current user of it right now and how they're going to use it, but it is being developed as a standalone industrial property. Another person who needs this small contractor's office, another electrical contractor, another carpenter, anyone else who's in the trades who would need a garage to park their vehicles and a very small office to do paperwork and keep that could utilize this building in the future. So it's just think about how that's going to work. But again, if that's, I think that's a discussion that I would be glad to hear from the commission.
Just as a quick follow-up to that, so as a condition of the site plan approval, and as we're stating today that there's going to be no outside storage, there's going to be, essentially no outside use. Is that something that carries along on a change of ownership down the road? Or does that drop off?
So it would be clearly stated. That's what I would recommend doing, when we get to a phase when you're ready for an approval or for a vote. But we will, and that's something that can be added as a note. No outside storage is approved as part of this plan, and then we hold that to site plan conformance. And if they add outside storage, then come back to the TPZ or review it with staff, see what it impacts, where it is. There really won't be much room left on this site.
Right.
After this, you could see, again, not the current person coming in. If you had a bad actor who started piling stuff up on the side or something, that would be something we'd have to go after for site plan enforcement. But that's something I think that could be, again, included on the plans, clearly understood as part of the application that there's no outdoor storage.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
In following Commissioner
Paul.
Minor.
And also, I'd say, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Woods also does have, Commissioner Woods also does have his hands up, just to let you know.
Okay,
Commissioner Woods, go ahead.
No, but Virginia go first.
okay, it's just a follow-up to
Okay,
Commissioner
Commissioner
Minor's comment and sort of suggestion about maybe utilizing the area like the driveway as sort of the suitable parking. Do you imagine them to be using the parking overnight there?
No.
So then that would just be sort of,
It's the employee comes to
Movement.
work,
Yeah.
got to
Incidental.
park so he can get the work truck.
yeah, so I mean, I also agree that that is, seems like a reasonable option.
Any other commissioner
Commissioner
questions?
Woods.
Oh, Commissioner Woods, yes.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have a plan that shows us where the actual line is for the residential zone?
Mr. Planner?
Yep, so there isn't I can bring up,
What you gotta bring it up, apparently, too.
yeah, I can bring up the GIS.
And then my question really is, if we need 25 feet, does that start at the property line? So the property line is 30 feet off the front of the building. From that.
Correct.
From that to the residential zone, we have 25 feet. And if we do, we've met the condition of the regulation, no? And the 2 spaces can stay.
So I'd say that the 2 spaces are located within that
Within the 25
25
feet.
feet. Trent, so,
They're within 25 feet of the property line.
yes, because the building is set back 30 feet
30 feet, right.
from the property line.
Yeah, let's
So
just
then
denote it
the
30
Zone
foot.
line runs somewhere down Carr Avenue, not necessarily along the east.
It appears to run along that right of way line or the property line. And Paul is gonna bring that up right now, I think.
So I believe those would be located within that 25 feet.
Right.
One more question then, and I'll let it go.
So the map is up now.
You can kind of see, this is the way, again, the zoning map depicts it, is Carr Avenue as the residential zone. So 161 is right here.
Okay. So it doesn't matter. I would say if we flip the doors to the other side of the building, it still doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It's
and
still
yeah,
within 25 feet. The Carr Avenue is in the I zone.
yeah, Carr Avenue is actually in the
Residential.
residential zone, and that's actually, so if it was flipped and the zone boundary was on the residential side of it, then it would be a non-issue. If it was down the center line of the road for the buffer, it says it shall apply to that, but it doesn't specifically say the parking. Again, ideally, those would have been 2 different sections of a regulation, not thrown into one paragraph together for, you know, potential interpretation or questions. But what I can do is, and actually, you can kind of notice too that in the past, put on the aerial here, this is an older one, but the site we're talking about is 161. Oh
Yep.
man, sorry about that. It gets a little funky when I try to zoom in, but you see 161 is vacant. 157, the neighboring does have the parking in the rear, and so as 151 does as well. It's again, it's the type of building and potentially the topography of the lot. The applicant's engineer can, you know, speak to that regarding, you know, how that is. And then you have ones like this that were just developed out and have not even a real formal driveway. And then you have old uses on the site, the one I showed next door, which has area in the back, but also has this big parking area in the front, which is paved pretty much the entire street line.
Yeah, so the only really way to solve this is eliminate the 2 spots and just have the driveway entering into the building. Don't count them as parking spots. The parking will be inside the building if that's agreeable with the applicant.
All set, Commissioner Woods?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Commissioner Pascarelli was first. Go ahead.
No, I went,
All right,
I'm all set.
Commissioner Droz?
A question, and then maybe a couple observations. How many trucks are gonna be stored in the building?
Typically 2.
Only 2?
Yeah, I know he has a trailer and some other, there could be 3 vehicles in there, but there's gonna be 2 active in there.
I asked because with a 3,000 square foot building that you were trying to maximize the building for parking vehicles. In the 3,000 square foot building, you'll put a lot more than one or two vehicles.
No,
That's
so,
why I was asking.
so he has two bays to
Yeah.
park vehicles.
Yep.
And they'll pull straight in. Like I said, I know he has one utility trailer that he puts in there, so that and a truck.
Yeah.
Like a pickup truck would fill up that side. The other side, I know he has probably more vehicles than he actually puts on the road every day, so any of his vehicles that he's not using, but he typically is looking to provide for two crews to work out of that
Gotcha.
location.
So will one parking space and one handicap be sufficient for that? If it's two crews?
What that allows him to do is at least gives the first employee in a spot to park. He leaves with his truck, then the next guy can park. There's gonna have to always be some jocking of vehicles, but we're trying to avoid anybody that gets there to go to work, kind of leaves his truck or car in the road, pulls the truck out, then parks in front of the garage.
So you're gonna be ending up with some vehicle jockeying issues. And I also noticed on the I know Google map or whatever it was, that Mr. Dixon was showing, that there was already a Campbell cooling van out on the street. So it's really a matter of, we'd like to be able to, I would think it'd be better to have that in front of the building than it would be on the street. But obviously, we've got the regulations to work through, and that's an open discussion. But, you know, noticing two things, one being that they're already parking on the street, and two, that one parking space and one handicap definitely isn't going to be enough it's still going to leave you jockeying something, you know, so appreciate it now. Thank you.
Commissioner Woods has his hand raised again.
Yes, Commissioner Woods.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Mr. Campbell's business typically is one man per van. So when you think of crew, it's one guy in a van or one guy in a truck. Very seldom do they gang up. And if they do, they each go in their own vehicle. So there's really, if there is one vehicle leaving there, it's just dedicated to that one person driving it.
Thank you, Commissioner
Thank
Woods.
you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else? All right, Commissioner
Just
Planner?
one final comment. Al, is the building inside ADA bathroom, ADA compliant, or is it not required and not be pursued?
That's kind of a building
Yeah.
issue.
The only reason I was saying is the
It probably will be. I think it'd probably be required to.
handicap parking space versus, that would be my only.
That's a regulation I'm gonna check. There may be a minimum number of spaces. Under a minimum number of spaces, you may not be required to have a handicap space. So I'm gonna verify that. And if that's the case, we can also
That would be
reduce
my
the amount
only
of paper.
concern, just to not to pigeonhole you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on parking? All right,
So staff would just like to add in, there's been, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
yes.
There's been, a lot of discussion about those parking spaces. If the interpretation of the regulation is how staff has viewed it, that no parking within 25 feet, that if those spaces are there, that's something that would require a variance to move forward. If there's another interpretation of this regulation, that would be within the TPZ's jurisdiction on how, again, the TPZ basically can interpret their regulations. Staff does interpret them, the CEO interprets them as well. This is the interpretation that we've kind of viewed it as, just because they are separate. If those are still on the site, as they are now, we would view the plan as non-compliant with the zoning regulations. So I don't know if it's something that
That's something
discuss with the applicant.
I'm gonna discuss with the applicant because he does have the property next door. First thing I want to do is I want to check the zone line because I thought we reviewed that on an older zoning map and not the GIS, because I found instances where not just ours, but any GIS doesn't always mirror the intent of the original mapping that it was created from. So I want to check the zone line to see if it is the west street line of Carr Avenue. And if it is, then I'll look to my client to maybe remove those two parking spaces, use some of his existing parking on the neighboring property.
Yep, and so that would be a question, and again, I can review that section of the regulations for the commission. There is ability for joint parking and that it would have to be a permanent easement for one to the other. Because I know originally it's kind of discussed in the staff report, when this first came in, it came in as an owner's garage. We were questioning whether it was just used as an accessory building. It is its own standalone building, so it can stay in its own standalone lot. But because it's its own standalone building on its own lot, that if it did utilize offsite parking on an adjoining parcel, that would have to be permanently locked in as an easement for that. That might be something for the commission to consider. Again, because this is a tight area, so if that's something that sounds reasonable to the commission, that's something I'll look into and as well. And you might be able to make that determination that the offsite parking could work, and I'll go into that as well.
We'll hold off on parking then until you make that determination. Okay, yes, Commissioner Minor.
Yeah, I think my preference would be is if it's not required, if we're not required to have parking there, and this is gonna create something that marries to the property next door on a permanent easement, I would rather see it omitted than to put it into a situation of permanently marrying the two together. If it's not required.
Mhm.
That would be
I
my
mean,
preference.
we have parking requirements per uses, so
Right.
how we calculate it, it may be technically required,
Right,
whether it's truly needed.
okay.
Okay,
All right, so it looks like I have a direction, and I'll work with the applicant and see what we can
Very good.
work out with the regulations and the parking and the joint use, and see what it can come before the next time it comes before you. So staff would recommend, if there's no more discussion, a motion to table the application.
Make a motion to table the application.
is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you for your time.
And for the record and for Noreen, it was Commissioner Minor, and the motion, and the second was
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hoffman.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Alan, too, I do have historic zoning maps that we can look at. If you run into something, we can compare whatever. I have them in a drawer, so we can look at them if we need to.
Okay, you want to do the next one? Doesn't matter. Hey, next petition is 4-24 site plan modification at 67 Payne Road for contractors equipment sales / service using the PD zone, plan development zone, applicant BSC Group, owner Payne Road, 67 LLC, contact Frank Becca.
Baca.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
For the record, my name is Francis Baca. I'm a professional engineer at the BSC Group in Glastonbury, Connecticut. 655 Winding Brook Drive, Glastonbury. Can I request?
You need to share, Frank, go ahead. You're good.
Very good. Very good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, Frank Baca from BSC Group. I'm here on behalf of State Point Properties and the developers at 67 Payne Road for the 67 Payne Road redevelopment. It was the former Frank's property. Frank's Garden Center is now going to become the future home of Sunbelt Rentals in Newington. They are moving from the Berlin Turnpike. We are here tonight to respectfully request site plan approval under section 533 of the Newington zoning regulations, if at all possible. Tonight, I'm going to speak briefly about the existing, I'm going to go over the site review. I will speak briefly about the erosion sedimentation control for the site. I will focus mostly on the proposed redevelopment, in particular the parking and other issues associated with the proposed development. I will touch on the drainage and water quality design. I will touch briefly on the utilities, lighting, and the landscaping and screening for the development, everything in accordance with the zoning regulations for the town. Just for those people that may not be familiar with the site is located as identified here in orange with the purple phantom line being the property line boundary for just to familiarize the orientation. On the eastern side of the site is Berlin Turnpike. Payne Road runs immediately north of the property. There is a large detention pond immediately south of the development. That detention pond collects essentially the majority of the water for all of the Payne Road industrial and commercial development. Located immediately south of the pond is Stu Leonard's, just to locate everyone. This is an existing the existing property survey for the existing site right now, I'd like to briefly mention the fact that under the original site condition, there was a larger building along the back half of the building and then a smaller greenhouse. The developer secured a demolition permit to remove some of that prior to this meeting. And then, so this is the exact orientation and existing condition of the site as it stands. The size of the site is 3.23 acres. There's an existing 11,200 square foot building to remain along the frontage of the property. It is one story with no basement. There are two access points to the site. There's one on the east. There's another one along the west, which is a shared entrance with 77 Payne Road adjacent to that. And there was originally greater than 35 parking spaces on the site, which we are not proposing to maintain. It's not necessary for the proposed use. There is existing wetland on the site that we met with the Wetland Commission. At the time, we did request administrative approval. We were granted the fact for it to be administrative approval. At this point, I am unsure as to whether or not it's been granted. I know I've spoken to Eric about that recently. As far as erosion sedimentation control for the site, the majority of the site drains from the north near Payne Road to the south towards the detention pond. To ensure that we are not discharging anything to the existing detention pond, we will be putting perimeter silt fence around the entire area as identified here in yellow. That actually has already been installed because due to some of the demolition that occurred on the site, it has, we wanted to ensure that there was no discharge to any of the wetland areas. Further beyond that, we have not yet installed a temporary sediment trap identified here in brown. And then the blue represents what we were considering temporary diversion swales, which will direct all flow to the sediment trap prior to discharging to the main discharge point for the site. Those temporary swales will ultimately be created into and be shaped into the proposed design of the site and will remain once the final entire site has been developed. I'm going to move on to the proposed development for the plan. There have been some minor modifications, presumably due to the site plans that you have seen, the most notable being the fact that we have shifted the western entrance to the site to the east to ensure that the entire entrance itself is located within the entire property. And I can speak about that a little bit more briefly later on. We are maintaining the existing pavement areas that were shown on the site originally. They are being milled and overlaid, so they will be new pavement, but the area associated with those paving areas will remain the same. We are adding an additional 0.83 acres of pavement behind the building as identified by the darker shade of gray right here. There are some additional concrete entrance pads to some of the overhead doors to the building. In the parking is identified adjacent on either side of the building. I'll speak about that a little bit later on. We are also installing 0.69 acres of pervious stone storage, again, because this is proposed to be the Sunbelt rental, predominantly being a generator storage area with some minor ancillary additional items. There will be some additional storage area required, and then to ensure that we've met all of our pervious coverage areas, it was coordinated with the future user that the pervious storage area would be acceptable for the storage of some of their materials. The green represented on the plan is also identified by or represents the landscape area, which is part of the PD requirement for this zone to ensure that you achieve an adequate amount of landscaping in addition to additional landscaping that I will speak about a little bit later in my presentation. As far as the design of the site, I'd like to draw your attention to our standard dumpster area, which will have access to direct access for our garbage truck. It will be screened in accordance with the zoning regulations with the standard 6-foot fencing and screened. I'd also like to point out some areas here which identify snow storage in some of our landscaped areas along here and then along a portion of our vegetated water quality swale, which I will speak about a little bit later. The site will also, and this is something that was just recently added, we are proposing full site fencing around for the security of the equipment that is going to be there, presumably 6-foot high chain link fencing that is going to be outside of the majority of the screening plantings that will be planted to basically separate our property from 77. As far as the parking, in accordance with 6.1.1.c, for an industrial manufacturing warehouse and or distribution, we are utilizing the top portion of this, which specifies that one space per employee on the largest shift. So in coordination with the future operator, they will have no more than a maximum of 10 employee spaces. So there are 8 spaces represented on the eastern side. There are 7 spaces represented on the western side. 10 of those spaces would be utilized by the employees, and then they are proposing a maximum of 5 retail spaces. It is considered, there is a small retail portion solely utilized by individuals that are renting or utilizing any of the equipment being stored on site. It is not going to be a retail use, whereas they would go there to purchase something and leave. Any of the retail use associated with that portion of the site will be utilized for rental of any of the equipment on site, which is why we don't have any need for any additional parking beyond that. I understand that it is the planner's, he has to make sure that if this site were ever to be sold, there is additional space available for expansion of parking at some point in the future, should there ever be a need to increase the parking to meet those requirements. Again, I mentioned earlier that there was a shift to the curb cut to meet the zoning ordinance for the town ordinance of a 28-foot maximum driveway. This was shifted over from its original shared use to provide a dedicated access to the property. Number one, there will be a truck access, which I will talk about momentarily. We wanted to ensure that there was a direct truck access for safety purposes. And then also for safety purposes, we wanted to limit any potential interaction between this property and the 77 Payne Road property. So we've moved this over and we've provided an additional 14-foot buffer between our property edge and the proposed access. I would like to note that actually, let me switch to the next. This is our turning movements. So I know it's a bit small to see, but on the left-hand side of the screen is the fire department turning access, the largest apparatus, the town fire department apparatus in order to enter the site and show circulation. And then speaking about what I mentioned as far as the main entrance, we are showing the turning movement for a standard WB67, one of the largest vehicle that you would have truck vehicle access to show its swing and circulation path. And again, as far as those utilizers of the parking area, it is intended for the eastern side of the site to be dedicated to employee parking. And then the western would have the minimal 5 spaces and handicap space associated with those retail users of the site. I would like to mention, due to the turning movement for the truck, we are proposing a concrete apron at the very entrance here to ensure that we aren't going to get any shoving of any of the bituminous material as a result of the forces generated by the turning movements of the vehicles, specifically on that entrance only. For water quality design, the entire site sheet flows from the north to the south as stated previously, and what we are showing is all of the drainage will be collected by those diversion swales and permanent diversion swales and be directed to a water quality swale that will provide our detention and our treatment of all of our flows associated with this development. I would say about 85% of the site ultimately discharges to this water quality swale. The black lines that you see here basically provide small check dams to store each individual water quality area to treat that flow. And then the westernmost portion of the swale will be set lower than the outlet point to ensure that, again, we maintain storage area here so that we provide treatment. The only portion of the site that does not enter the water quality swale is there's a small catch basin here that collects a small portion of the parking area. this catch basin will have it's called a hydrodome. It is it's a hydrodynamic separator that can get installed into the existing catch basin that's there. It functions similar to the way a catch basin hood would, but it's more as it's designed specifically to slow flows down and collect additional sediment. I would like to point out that there is an existing water quality structure on site. The top was open. There was actually a question in some of our reviews when we coordinated with Eric and with Paul to open the water quality structure and ensure that it's still functioning effectively. We performed a CCTV inspection of the entire site development, all of the drainage on site. We opened the top of that water quality structure, and all of the catch basin sumps have been vacuumed out, so the site is all clean now. I will note as part of the inspection that a root ball was identified in our easement area. This detention drains, so the entire site drains to a catch basin where it drains in an easement offsite across 77 and 67, and then discharges into the detention pond to the south. There was a root ball noted in the piping here. That has been discussed with the developer, and they are fully on board with accessing this to clean out the pipe and ensure that there's not going to be any potential blockage. This is an example, a potential example of what the water quality swales could potentially look like. They will be fully planted with vegetation. The intent behind that is to provide nutrient uptake, pollutant uptake, in addition to the stormwater storage. So any nitrates or nitrogen, phosphorus will be absorbed through the plantings as they essentially sit there and are stored over time before they are discharged to the standard system. And this will provide us not only the water quality volume for the site, but it will substantially improve the quality of the discharge of the flow exiting the site at this time. Briefly, for utilities, we are utilizing as many of the utilities as we can. We are providing an additional transformer that's located in accordance with Eversource standards. It is outside of the front yard setback. There will be a vehicle maintenance wash water bay inside the building. They are only anticipating washing between 1 and 2 generators a day. It's not going to be the same volume of water as like a car wash or something like that. We have installed a oil water separator as a result of that, and this has all been coordinated with MDC. We've submitted the general permit for a industrial discharge use, which took the place of the vehicle maintenance wastewater general permit. They have not gotten back to us yet, but that has been submitted to them. I'm sorry, as far as lighting, the small dots that you see are all standard light poles. They are all in accordance with the height requirements for Newington, and they are all dark sky compliant. They will be shoebox LED type structures. They're not necessarily decorative, but they're not halogen or anything like that. They will be Energy Star and dark sky compliant, and there is no discharge. There is no discharge of light over top of the property boundaries. Any flood or anything like that oversight will be blocked by any on-site shields in the light fixtures themselves. As far as landscaping, we have added a bit more landscaping than from the Wetland Commission meeting. We've added some additional based on comments from the town planner. We have some additional foundation plantings up front here. We have our standard street trees. We have trees provided along the rear of the property. The spaces that you see again are provided specifically for the snow storage area. If there is any potential additional snow storage necessary, we can potentially put it over here adjacent to the building temporarily during a storm, because there will not be parking on this side. And then once the storm is over, this can be transported back to the standard snow storage area. I'd also like to note that the smaller green areas identified here were provided to meet the requirement for landscaping within parking areas. So this additional landscaping area here and here was provided to satisfy that requirement, in addition to provide additional screening. And then, I'm sorry, additional snow storage. And then as far as the adjacent borders of the property, we will be adding additional screening plantings, evergreens, and other such type of trees out on the outside of the fence in this case to provide screening from the adjacent property. The only other thing I'll mention is there is proposed a building sign. It was coordinated to be in accordance with the zoning regulation based on the size of the frontage. I do believe the owners would like to pursue, I should say the users would like to pursue a monument sign at this time, but it has not been formally put onto the plans at this point. And with that, I would like to thank you and again, respectfully request approval of the site if at all possible, so that the developer can move forward. They are very much looking forward to get started work on this property. They obviously they're under a time frame, but it's they are more than willing to work with the commission to get a conditional approval. Thank you very much.
Mr. Planner?
Thank you. As far as staff, again, staff has been working with the applicant. As far as the wetland application goes, comments were provided at that point that some were site plan comments, but it was focused more on the wetland. We did receive it, I believe. It was this application was dropped off 2/16, if I'm correct, last month, and then intaked into 2/20 because time came in. Then we had a holiday in between and all that. So we did issue comments on the 4th of this month, and we did receive comments back pretty much on Friday. Unfortunately, staff was looking at time available. Engineering has been a little tied up. Eric has been a little tied up too with enforcement and issues that have come up that we do not have a wetlands report yet, approval. Most of the items that we have worked with the applicant have been resolved. There's a lot of improvements they made to the plan. As you can see, the landscaping, the buffers, it brings it a little closer back to when it was a nursery before. Of course, it's a nursery, it was planted. I think at the end of the day, looking at the site, it's gonna have those buffers, it's gonna have a higher level of aesthetic that we've worked with the applicant and they put the effort forward to. The one issue is we have not had a complete review from the town engineer of the submitted documents. So that's kind of where staff is at with the approval. And I'll refer to Eric regarding, because he is the wetland agent as well, one of the many hats he wears. But I do not believe he has been able to issue and do the review for a wetland report yet.
No, I have not completed the review. I did start it this afternoon. And knowing that the applicant was gonna be before the commission night and, just didn't get a chance to completely finish it. And I'll probably have some, like I said, minor comments. As the planner stated, it's much improved. The water quality swale is a big improvement for water leaving the site now from what it used to be. So that was something that the Conservation Commission was happy with. So we're just moving forward with that at this point. I expect something, prior to the next meeting for you guys that it would potentially be able to be acted upon.
Thank you. Any commissioner comments? Commissioner Minor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick question for you. So you're indicating the drainage and there were a lot to be sheet draining to the south. Am I correct on that?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Drainage going to the south, sheet draining to the south
That's
from the
correct.
building?
That's correct.
My only concern is just on the application, and I know we have a very similar business just on Richard Street, is retaining any potential contaminants just from vehicles that are left in storage or equipment that's left in storage. Is there any way of detaining that before it goes off property would be my only concern.
Coincidentally, and I'm going to move this down beyond my presentation, but I have on here some of the potential equipment that is planned to be stored. And coincidentally, there is actually on site, they are planning to store vehicle secondary containment. So the intent behind it is this can be utilized in the event that there would be any leakage. But to clarify, and this is something I stated at the Wetlands Commission meeting, Sunbelt is fully intending on keeping all top quality equipment to be used, and they are not expecting there will be maintenance on site. So there will be fixing any issues such as that. I will note that the way the stone is intended to be utilized, it's about 12 inches thick. If there was anything observed that was not contained, it would essentially stay localized in the stone, and the stone itself could be contained and removed if it was ever identified that there was an issue. If there is an issue that makes its way past the stone, the water quality swale does function as a storage area to secondary contain that as a secondary option. And again, we do have, like I said, we do have the individual check dams that would essentially hold those areas. And as that continues to go down, there will be a hood in that one of the catch basin hoods in the final discharge point. So as a third and final fail safe to ensure if there were to be any type of leakage or contamination or anything like that, it would be stopped before exiting into the detention basin. The design of the water quality swale with the plantings, they thrive on the use of some of these nutrients are not the right word. Some of these contaminants, they will be planted specifically to treat some of the nitrates and some of the phosphorus that would come off vehicle wash water or just rainwater from the vehicles.
Yeah.
And they're intended to treat those. So anything that would make its way into the water quality swale, essentially those contaminants will be treated before discharging.
Okay. And just one quick final question. I know that the Turnpike facility currently houses some dehumidification equipment that comes in from flood zones that they bring in. Is there additional storage of those being proposed for future use here as well? As well as larger generators, 2 meg generator size, larger equipment, or just smaller?
What I was told is they do not have any expected hydraulics or anything like that. It would just be the generators. I was not informed of anything with regard to the dehumidification or anything like that. But again, they will plan on maintaining the containment berms. And if something like that were to be on site, it could very easily be utilized. They have to place the containment berm somewhere anyway. So basically, if an equipment of that type were on site, they very easily could utilize a containment berm as an initial primary form of containment in that case.
And just one final question, the site lighting proposed with the new residential development that's essentially across the street now, any consideration to daytime, nighttime occupancy sensor, parking lot, site lighting? So they essentially stay off and sense motion and activate with motion versus being left out, white out all night long.
I'm sure that could be a consideration by the owner's team.
Just to consider.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that Target has done that same system. and
Okay.
Has been relatively successful. All right, thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? Mr. Hoffman? No, Gia? Mr. Gia? Okay, Mr. Planner?
Yep. So at this point, there isn't a wetlands approval.
Okay.
So per statutes, again, the goal is to work with the applicant. It's just a matter of timing. We anticipate that by the time of the next meeting, we'll have everything wrapped up.
Okay.
You want to make a motion to table the application until our next meeting pending wetlands approval?
There's a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any additions for scheduling coming up?
Yep. So I believe we have old business first.
Okay, old business, I'm sorry, right.
Yep, and so this is the partial site plan acceptance and bond request for the approved petition 2321 at 333 Berlin Turnpike. Again, this was at the last meeting. Currently, I just wanted to kind of give you an update. We do also have the people from those developments who have joined us online. When I originally put out the agenda, I noted that a staff report, staff update was going to be indicated, but they're here as well as if you have any questions. So what I'd like to do is first, just to give you an update on what's going on with the process. So work is continuing on site. I do have some photos to show you after. Today I received an updated phasing plan from the residential component of this project. So the updating phasing plan, again, the highlights of that, and just received it today. I got a physical copy. I was out there on site, discussed the project with people, and then came back and got an email. So I haven't had full time to review, of course. But the main highlights of it is that residents and the Meadow Commons commercial users will use Payne Road for exit and entrance. Again, they're still working on the OSTA approval. We have no news on that as well for the commercial side. And again, if both plan to use it, again, that's the major exit and entrance to the site. But they'll plan on using Payne Road will be the change. The one you had in front of you at the last meeting, Payne Road was kind of closed off and was going to be contractor only. So that'll be a change. The contractor will limit construction deliveries between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. To kind of get out of the early morning, number one, to disturb residents, and number two, to get out of the early morning leaving for work, and then again, to be done by the time that people are coming home. Construction deliveries will have a contractor coordinating and providing access safely through the site. So what they plan, as they discussed with me, it'd be pretty much that any delivery to the site will be assisted. You'll basically have a flagger in front of it just to make sure that there's no issues with the site. So you'll have either, whatever site worker for those developers will be out there, whoever they designate to do so. Jersey barriers will be located at the corner of Building 2 to highlight the intersection, and the fencing has been pulled back at the corner to provide better sight lines. I have a picture of this area. That was the area I was concerned about, because when you open Payne Road, you have a construction area next to it. If you have a fence with scrim in a 90-degree corner, you have no sight triangle. So I saw that as a potential issue, so I raised that with the developer. And then a temporary fence has been added to the temp fire lane to prevent non-construction travel in that direction. And I don't have that up for your review tonight. You didn't have a chance to have it in your packets. We should have it hopefully at the next meeting. Regarding the bonding, we're still working with the two developers to get that bond language and work with the town manager and town attorney to do the review. Hopefully we can have that for the next meeting as well, at least say, here's what's in place, here's the language, and kind of have that so the commission understands going forward of what type of surety, what is out there for this project, for that partial acceptance. So I'll have you, Vanna White, please.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
So this is the residential building that again is looking for that partial acceptance. They got their signs out. It's getting a lot more cleaned up. You can see more loam has been put in front of the building. They're starting to level everything out. That was one of the main staff comments too, is you still had all the different transitions between all the sidewalks. It wasn't quite ready for our residences to move in yet. At the last update, there was no sidewalk on the interior courtyard. As you can see, it's been poured. So that's again for the amenity space and offices that are down in that area. There's no residences associated with that spot. That's primarily amenity space. Again, around the corner, this was another area where the sidewalk wasn't put in yet. And actually what they're doing, I don't know if I have it on the next slide too, or maybe I omitted it. So I omitted it from the next slide, but at the end of that sidewalk, they're also putting loam in as well. The landscaper should actually be out there within the next week or so, I was told. They started putting the loam down, so we're gonna see again that leveled off area. So far, so warm. I don't want to curse it on what's out there now, but there's a possibility that landscaping can start pretty early this year, just by the weather that we're having. So as you can see, this is the one area, that corner is just to your right. You can see there's a little bit more tracking. They cleaned up the site, but of course it's an active construction site. You can see the parking that's over on the left. You have the excavator that's putting in the dirt around there and just contract work going on. So this is the corner that was kind of in question. So the new phasing plan that will come to you, that fence will not be where it's located now. It'll be behind that light pole. I've asked them if they were gonna, put in any curb or work on that. So we'll see what answer when it comes down to what they plan on doing there. But that's that main corner that I saw as being a potential issue, potential danger on the site for if residents were moving in and you had the two vehicles or a construction vehicle coming along. Again, that same corner looking down Payne Road. Again, this is the road that they're planning on utilizing, and it'll need to be cleaned up prior to occupancy. Looking back on that same road, you can see on building 2, which would be the next one that they would phase in. They do already have the sidewalks along that extension that leads out to Payne Road. So there is some flat work that's done on that site, but most of the site is still under construction. This is the area right down that access drive. They're actually leveling off with loam. That's where the dog park's going to be. Just as a FYI, but they were looking at, having that possibly in sooner than later and having it part of that. My main comment to them on site that if the dog park is in, I want that entire sidewalk to be accessible because we don't want people with their dogs having to walk down the access road. So on the commercial end, so that's pretty much where things have gone along the residential. See, things are moving, more sidewalk is going in, landscaping is starting, things are being leveled off. And then at the next meeting, hopefully the applicant will be here to present their phasing plan to you, and we'll get some comments to them in the interim and kind of flush it out. So for the commercial side of the development, this is off of the side of Cava. So on my previous pictures, this was a open pit. As you can see, the wall's been installed. There'll be a guardrail following. I talked to them. I think they anticipated maybe next week or 2 weeks, but that kind of have that area closed and cordoned off. Cava itself, the last picture I showed you was a dirt floor. They have completed the underground work in it, and they're actually moving pretty good pace. So they might actually exceed their potential. I believe they were June, if I remember correctly, on the time that they said they would potentially open. So we'll see how that progresses. And again, most of the stuff on the commercial site, as we looked at last time, it was pretty far along. It was pretty well developed. It's just some minor transitions here and there, looking at manholes. And the main thing on the commercial side is, again, that OSTA approval. So that's the biggest holdup right now, that right in, right out, and having some type of approval or know that it's going to be approved to move forward. So this is the one I'd like to just highlight too, that Shake Shack is very far along. I don't have interior pictures, but tables, kitchen, everything's pretty much ready. And as far as I know, there's maybe very few inspections, if any, to be done. So they're going to likely be moving into training of staff sometime soon, which will be good. So as you can see, building's well constructed. Final pavement is in front of it. ADA spaces, signage is up, and the outdoor dining furniture is in. So it's pretty much there to almost ready to go. And just a different view. Again, this is the outdoor dining that's associated with Shake Shack. They did bring up some of the levels around it with a loam. Again, it will need to be planted and everything, but as far as it goes, it's pretty secure on the site right now around Shake Shack. So that's just my update on that. I do have representatives from the developers if you have any specific questions or if they would like to add anything to my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Planner. I went by the other day and I thought we had told them before. I had made a suggestion that put some type of barrier rail in there with barrels to make sure people going out stay to the right and not go to the left. I didn't see that there yet. I hope before they open any business in there, that gets put in place on a temporary basis until they get OSTA approval. Sorry, Mr. Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Paul, have there been any comments back from OSTA that anybody is aware of at this point? Staff comments on their end at all?
Well, I haven't heard much myself. I believe Jamie Anderson is on the phone on the online as well too. So if you would like to, Mr. Chairman, I can have him address that. Jamie.
State your name and address for the record, please.
Jamie Anderson, 4 Flanagan Drive in Framingham, Massachusetts, with Grossman Development Group. Yes, so we have heard back from OSTA a few times. The initial comment was based upon, not wanting to have a U-turn at the heading northbound at the Target store on the turnpike because, they thought that we were going to have the Payne Road entrance open. So that's why we went back to having the Payne Road entrance open. And they did have some more minor comments as of late last week that I know our engineer has actually responded to as of today. They seem to be pretty minor comments, making sure that we're not exceeding any certain, square footage of restaurant, for instance. So all that data is back into their hands, and I know that our engineer is actually speaking with the head of OSTA, Joe Willett, on this directly, and so we do have his ear, and he does fully understand our time frame and our scheduling here to get that finalized ahead of the 27th hearing.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? Yeah. No. Okay, I just hope, like I said, my only concern is going out of that driveway. If you don't channel traffic to the right, you're gonna have somebody maybe making a left turn late at night.
Yep. No, I heard that today as well from Paul, loud and clear. So, we also heard sort of somehow we can string the barrels together so that they're not getting pushed around. So we're going to have 2 sets of barrels out there. I just did want to hear, if there was going to be any final comments from OSTA, but we're going to get that binder coat. We're going to get that temporarily striped ahead of opening, obviously, and then we'll put the barrels in.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Any comments from the public? No? Okay. Okay, moving along, petitions for scheduling, Mr. Planner.
Okay, so those are noted on your agenda. There'll be one which actually will be all these may likely be on the 10th. We're reviewing plans right now. The freestanding sign petition, we've been actually waiting for a little while from a survey. We actually did receive the survey yesterday.
Correct.
On that. And so as far as scheduling goes, we're looking at the 10th for that, April 10th. And for the re-subdivisions, those are have initial comments from engineering, and we're going to work on those. But again, those are re-subdivisions, so they do require a public hearing. So all these will be a public hearing item. These subdivisions are smaller ones. We're not talking about large. We're typically 2-lot, 3-lot. I think one's a 3 and one's a 2.
No, one's 2 lots, and the other one is an interior lot, which is a
Interior.
special permit. The one
Special permit, correct.
on Church Street.
So they're both, again, it's kind of the trend we've been seeing of people looking to maximize the capability of their land. But again, we'll go into that with staff reviews and when they come for a public hearing.
And, okay, next is town planner report.
Okay, so current land use applications, we keep that on there at all time. Again, it's a link. People can click on it, see what's going on out there. The second item that I put on here that I actually plan on pretty much keeping on here, and I'll start developing subheadings underneath it as well, is to kind of discuss, the discussions we've had as the commission and staff. The one item tonight is I kind of wanted to, at the last meeting, we had briefly discussed cannabis, the regulations under this item. What I have done is there was a discussion regarding a potential moratorium and looking at the regulations. So I wanted to inform the commission. So I have put a draft copy into CROG, Capital Region Council of Governments. There's a 30-day requirement for any zoning regulation. The statutes aren't as clear on moratoriums on exactly how they should be run, but whenever I've done that moratorium, I run it as it is a normal zoning regulation because that's the statutory way to do it. It's clear, it's cut, it's even, and it's a clearly understood process. So that's what I'd be looking to do. It does enable it to be on the agenda as soon as April 10th, but it doesn't necessarily have to be utilized. Again, the point of this having it there is what I plan to do at the next meeting is to kind of coalesce what our regulations currently are, identify areas, hopefully give you some visuals, and it will actually be on the agenda under the basically town planner report or under an item, we can discuss that. But at least as a discussion about the cannabis regulations, because that way it will be out there, noted. Those of the public who are following along will be able to see the agenda and know, okay, this item is being discussed. I have an interest in it and I want to see what's going on. So my plan at the next meeting is to pull that together, have some examples for the commission, pull out specific parts of the regulation and say, okay, here's what we have. Here's other potential examples. This is what we're seeing as a trend in the area, or this is what we see as a trend across the regulations. And do we want to change this? And my goal at the next meeting is really to discuss kind of that order of magnitude of change that the commission feels that the regulations either don't need, do need, and what items. That way, at the next meeting, that if it's a larger magnitude that you believe are there, that a moratorium could be instituted while we work on those regulations. If the TPZ finds that the tweaks aren't imminent and large and that it can be done during just a process, you do not have to utilize the moratorium, but I want to make it there as an option too, because it was discussed. So that's my plan for the next meeting. So just to kind of let you know, and if there's any specific topics that you would like me to look into, now would be a good time to let me know.
Mr. Meyer?
Thank you. Well, I noticed on the CROG referral list that we were listed one of quite a few municipalities with the cannabis header. Are you working with any of the other planners locally in terms of what they're up to? Because it looked like there was probably 6 or 8 towns that were listed as wanting to do something with cannabis. I'm just curious to see if there are others that are similar along to where we are at this point.
Yep. So currently I have not, but that is something that, that's my plan between now and the next meeting, is to be able to pull that stuff together, pull those trends, and see what's kind of going on and what our regulations specifically address.
All right, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you. Any other comments from any other commissioners? Commissioner Claffey, Commissioner Woods, any comments?
No,
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Chairman.
Oh, okay. Communications, are we
so actually,
did the letters?
What I would like to do after that is, this is another thing that I just want to give you a couple pictures, show you what's going on with some sites that are happening right now. So this is the swim school at 93 Payne Road. They're continuing progress. They have the lot paved. I have a picture of actually inside the pool, but you can see there's still a lot of work to be done. But it is progressing. Drainage is in, sidewalks are in, pavement is in, and actually you can see the pool itself is in. It wasn't directly from the owner, so it's kind of third party, but one of the workers who I was talking to on the site actually said there has been a lot of interest in this use, and they're actually booking well before, and they're actually booked out pretty well. So this is actually something that it's an interesting use to have a small swim school like that for parties, for lessons and everything. But from initial interest, it appears it'll be successful, and I hope it is very successful. Okay. So the next item is Culver Street, just to give you an update on what's going on with that property. What I have shown you here is we worked with the, when they were doing the land clearing, we worked with them, and what they actually have done is expand the tracking pad and expand a laydown area behind. When they first started, we had a complaint from a resident regarding a truck semi that was actually being loaded on the road. So we talked to Officer Dean on that one, and he was able to go out there, and we worked with him pretty quickly. And it's one of those where it was a tree clearing contractor and not the actual site contractor themselves, but it was resolved. But what they've done is actually after that, they striped it, enlarged it. So right now you have an enlarged laydown area inside, which has actually worked out well. You can kind of see the site itself the tree clearing is complete on the site. And what they're doing now is they're working on stripping the topsoil. So initial grading is happening. We can kind of move through these pictures. You can see, so there's wetland on the northern end of the property, which is a little lower lying wetland, but there's also a wetland pocket with basically a small pond area. That is actually not what you see in front of you. That is the sediment control and the erosion control behind it. Sediment control is doing its job, and that the wetland is downhill from that. And this is looking at the site. This is actually looking north. You have the existing residential property, just a little bit of that, a little green space that's left in the right of the picture. That's their backyard. And you have topsoil is being stripped as well. They originally tried to start stripping it from the bottom. It's too much topsoil. It's an old farm soil. So they're slowly working their way actually up the hill and incremental. So they are working on a subgrade of the property. And just another picture. And that's the soil stockpile building up. It's pretty rich stuff. And the other one, just to give you an update, I went to the site today to look. As far as 550 Cedar Street, it has been a little quiet on our front as far as requests for additional inspections. I've spoken with the building official. I do plan actually to reach out to them and see how progress is going, see if there's any impediments. But they do have, the two buildings are constructed. They've started working on the site landscaping. They have the paths going through, again, additional grass seed we put down, but the building shells are complete. I believe they're working interior still. That rear building, again, this is behind the rear building, but the rain garden is in behind that building. Nothing's planted yet. And then also that bituminous walking trail that goes around the back of the building and connects to is in. This is the area of the site where the third building will eventually go. Again, they have constructed the two. I hope to reach out to them and get just some information on how progress is moving along. Because I know there has been some questions. I've received a call or two asking what's going on with the property. And I know people have been on a list waiting to see, okay, when is this going to get open? Because we do have a need for affordable housing in this town. So there are people who are, very curious about when this is going to open. So I hope to get a little more information for the commission. And that is all I have under the town
Thank
planner's
you.
report. Unless there's any questions for me.
Any questions? Commissioner Woods, Commissioner Klafke, any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, CROG letters you have in the packet. Okay, any questions on those? Okay.
So the one item, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I forgot to announce it under that, but the next meeting, I believe it's March 27th, is actually going to be held at the senior center in the multipurpose room. This room is taken up by the voting, early voting. Unfortunately, when they have the early voting, even though they stop at 6, they have to close and lock the doors and no one can come in. So the room has been taken offline. We're going to have the same issue come up in October. I have looked for alternative rooms in October right now. I'm looking at the A, B, and C conference room upstairs because the Helen Nelson room is taken for that day as well too. But I'm looking at additional options. But just as a point of information, it'll come out as a special meeting agenda because it is in a different location than originally put into the clerk's office. But my goal would be to settle on a location for October. I plan to bring that in front of you to say whether either I just file it with the clerk, notify you that it's been changed, the location, and that way that one will not be a special meeting and we won't be, if an item did need to be bring up, we're not as strictly limited.
Thank you. Any town letters at all?
Nope, that's just the CROG letters.
All right.
Yeah, and if there's any questions on those, please let me know. You can also feel free to give me a call.
Next, we're gonna go to public participation. Anyone wishing to speak?
No one online has their hand up, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, remarks by commissioners. Any remarks by the commissioners?
No.
Okay, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. It was a very productive meeting, I think. Got a lot accomplished. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And Noreen, if you can still hear me, that was Commissioner Minor and Commissioner Gross for the first and the second.